In today's episode, we're joined by Jack Carr, former Navy SEAL and author, creator of The Terminalist on Amazon Prime. The new series Dark Wolf was also created by him as well. Jack is a creative force, and we learned a lot in this conversation about filmmaking, about writing, about war, and I think you guys can take a lot from this as well. Jack Carr, welcome to the show. People are excited to hear us all talk about what you got working on. The Terminalist is our favorite show on Amazon Prime. I think it's the best thing they've put out. Thanks for joining the show, pal.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. I am such a huge fan. I saw Raiders of the Lost podcast when it popped up on I think it was Instagram, and I was like, "What? What a genius name for something!" And because it
Yeah.
tells a story, and I love that. Titles are so important. Like titles of my books, I put a lot of thought into those titles, and I like them to have multiple meanings. But I was like, "Oh, Raiders of the Lost podcast, just that like tells me before I've even met you guys, like what this podcast is about and who you guys are." And so
Thank
it's
you. Thank
genius.
you.
I
There was a
absolutely.
bit of a speed bump
And,
because people at first thought we were only an Indiana Jones podcast, but once they saw us like post, so we kept getting like cosplayers like, "Hey, I'd love to come on the show."
Yeah.
We're like, we're
Yeah.
not that kind of show.
Not quite, not
But
quite.
once we build up the repertoire, and I think people really are attracted to our film taste, especially when we talk about movies from the past that we love, not just new releases. And I mean, we don't watch a ton of TV, but The Terminalist definitely caught our eyes.
We grew up watching
ago.
war films. We love war films. It's a really great genre in film. And then what you guys did on the small screen was outstanding. And Dark Wolf is so good. I'm halfway through it. It's just epic. And there's new Black Ops elements. There's some espionage elements. Taylor Kitsch is crushing it. I think it's just a really a step up and a level up on top of the first season. So I'm so excited to finish it. Can you talk about bringing these amazing stories to life on the small screen for Amazon Prime?
Yeah, so Dark Wolf, it's out now. I'm hit #1 on Prime Video, just like Terminalist did. Terminalist jumped back into that top 10 too. I think hit #4 with Dark Wolf at #1, so that's good. Hopefully that bodes well for future seasons of both. We'll see. They have to wait till they get 2 weeks after the final episode, then they get their numbers in, and they use those are the numbers that they use to I guess impact and influence their decisions and negotiations with future seasons and all that. So we're not quite there yet. I guess there's maybe another week or so, half a week, before we get those numbers in, and then they'll really start diving into what's next. But yeah, Taylor Kitsch brought so much to this character of Ben Edwards in The Terminalist. So it was done so much better than I did it in the book. Book was more one-dimensional. I wish I had done as good of a job with the book, that character, that the writers did in the writers' room on it, and then what Taylor brought to it and how he elevated it with his performance. And I wish I'd done that in the book, but I didn't. And then we got to the end of The Terminalist, and it came out July of 2022, and I was already thinking about spinoffs at that point and what to do next. I knew Chris's schedule, so I knew it would be a little while before he could dive into anything. And then I didn't know how negotiations would go with him and his agents and lawyers and Amazon and all the other things that come into play when you're dealing with someone of his star power. And then he called me and said, "What do you think about doing a Ben Edwards
Yes.
spinoff?" And that wasn't the I had written. And I was like, "Chris, that's a great idea. Let's do that." And then he called Taylor, and Taylor was 100% on board. Taylor is so committed to this character and to the SEAL community, and such a great guy. Rides motorcycles like I do. Like we're like a real family now. It's really cool to see how this has all come together. But he was on board, and Amazon wanted more because they had their numbers right away because it all dropped at once for Terminalist, so people could binge it in July of 2022. And then I got together with the showrunner, David DiGilio, Jared Shaw, who's a SEAL buddy of mine who gave the book to Chris, who plays Boozer in the show. And now he's a writer, executive producer, actor, and technical advisor. So he's all those things on the show now. But we all got together in Park City, Utah at my house, and we beamed Max Adams, who's a former Army Ranger and writer, in from his house. And so the four of us were there and started working through what would become Dark Wolf. And then we pitched it to Amazon at the end of October of 2022. So that's pretty quick after the end of Terminalist. And they wanted it right away, instant green light. And then True Believer was also wound up in that with Chris. And then we put the writers' room together in early 2023, and then the writer's strike
Yeah.
hits.
Oh my God.
And that put us behind by about a year on both projects, even though the writer strike and then the actor strike that was kind of tacked on at the end was about 7 months total, I believe. But because of like the kind of things that compound from there, the second and third order effects, it really put us behind by a full year. So Dark Wolf should have come out last summer. Terminalist should have, I'm sorry, True Believer should have come out this summer, but we're about a year behind. So we'll see. And then we'll see what happens going forward. We're talking about maybe doing Savage Sun, which is my third novel, as a feature, so as a film, and that would be pretty cool, something different. And I think that's of the novels, that's probably the one that lends itself to a feature. So
Love to
we'll
see that.
see
I love
what's
how you just
ahead.
casually name drop Chris Pratt. Chris called me. No big deal. Chris, the man who voices Mario. Chris called me. Obviously, he's got way bigger credits. Real quick before we continue, check out this amazing The Running Man poster over my shoulder provided to us by our great friends at movieposters.com. Use our code Raiders10 to get posters from there today and get 10% off at your checkout. A lot of people are also using our affiliate link. We get notifications. We love to see that. Our affiliate link is available in the episode description or our social media bios. That gets us a commission off every purchase using that link. So use our affiliate link. Use our coupon code Raiders10 for 10% off. It's a win-win for everybody. You get an incredible poster from our great friends at movieposters.com. But I'm so, impressed and really happy for your success. It must be so hard, but I'd love to understand the transition. Obviously, I read that your whole life you want to be a SEAL, and then, which is its own undertaking in general, but then to be a writer as well and a storyteller. Is there a transition of skill sets that you learned in SEAL training and operating in the Navy for 20 years? Has that translated out at all to storytelling? Has storytelling always been a part of your DNA, like training and being a bud?
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's not what people would think. People mostly assume that I'm going to say, "Oh, the discipline from the military really lent itself to writing," and I'm up every
Yeah.
morning at 3 after I do my cold plunge and
The
work out,
frogman
like
filmmaker.
nothing distracts me, like all of that stuff. And that's totally not the case. I like get out of bed, launched into the day, juggling kids, getting to school. Complete friggin' chaos from the second I wake up till the second I go to bed in the evening. But what does transfer over more than anything else is aggressive and creative problem solving, because really that's what you're doing on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan. You're adapting to an enemy that's in turn adapting to you and trying to outthink you. You're trying to capitalize on momentum. You're looking for gaps in the enemy's defenses. And now, yes, I'm doing that as a way to build and create new readers in a time when readers are just kind of plummeting because there's so many other distractions out there. But also, I'm solving these problems on the page. So I'm okay. How is this character going to get out of this? Okay. And now, if I mess it up, the consequences aren't nearly as dire as they were in Iraq and Afghanistan. I can come back and edit. I can wake up the next morning and say, "Oh, that was a bad idea. I should have just had him do this instead." So you can do all that as an author, and I love doing that. But that's probably the thing that is more of a parallel than anything else, is that aggressive and creative problem solving. But now I'm doing it on the page. So there is that. But I wanted to write since I was a little kid. I knew I wanted to serve my country in the military. And then I knew I wanted to write. So from the earliest days, I wanted to serve my country in the military. Found out about SEALs at age 7. And then about age 10, I start reading the books my parents are reading, certainly by age 11 in the sixth grade. But 10 is about that time frame, fifth grade, when I start moving over from, let's say, the young adult fiction like Farley Mowat, something like that, like Never Cry Wolf, and that sort of book, into the same kind of books my parents are reading. So the Ludlums and the Le Carrés, and about that time Hunt for Red October comes out from Tom Clancy and introduces us to Jack Ryan. And so all of those books are coming out at a very formative time in my life. So by sixth grade, I'm reading David Morrell, who created Rambo with 1972 with First Blood. He writes a series of books in the 80s that start with Brotherhood of the Rose, and then League of Night, or then Fraternity of the Stone, League of Night and Fog. One they made into an NBC miniseries, which was awesome, with Robert Mitchum back in the
Oh, no
day.
way.
Wow.
And it's so good. It's hard to find these days. I have it on Betamax, I think, in my mom's attic still to this day. But what I'm really doing, and what I didn't realize at the time, is that by reading all those guys, by reading Tom Clancy and Nelson DeMille and David Morrell and AJ Quinnell and JC Pollock and Mark Olden and Stephen Hunter and Louis L'Amour and all of these guys that I'm reading during these formative years, let's say age 10 to 20, I'm really giving myself an education in the art of storytelling, but from the fan perspective. So when I hear Quentin Tarantino talk about not going to film school, but being a fan of films, and now, of course, he's obviously, as you guys know right there, is in his encyclopedia of film knowledge, particularly 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s type of history, but even more broadly than that. And he can just recall that stuff so quick, and it's all a part of him because it was so impactful to him growing up. And I think there's a similarity there in that I'm not reading these books during that time frame with any sort of a Machiavellian type of an intent, meaning I'm not like reading Tom Clancy and thinking, oh, I don't want to write one day after I leave the military, 30 years from now or whatever. How did he do this? How did he structure this? How did he do this character development? No, I'm just enjoying the story in the pages of these books. And at the same time, the power of popular culture, I'm watching all these movies. I'm watching First Blood. I'm watching Rambo First Blood Part 2, Commando, Predator, Lethal Weapon, Die Hard,
Oh my
Red Dawn,
God.
like all these movies that are just so impactful to me during that time frame. And a lot of those ones that I just rattled off, the protagonists had backgrounds that I wanted in real life one day. So they're former Army Special Forces from Vietnam, or they're, let's say a lot of the TV shows even back in during that time frame were Navy SEALs, former Navy SEALs like Magnum, or Army Special Forces, or Marine Recon, or Marine Sniper, or CIA paramilitary. And then in the contemporary thrillers of the 80s and 90s, they're using those skill sets essentially from Vietnam to solve problems in whatever the contemporary thriller is, whether it's on the page or the screen or a television show. So, but all of that was hitting me at the right time when I'm not distracted by a phone because they didn't exist back then in my pocket, with a bunch of apps on there that are essentially there to keep me from reading and keep me from doing any deep thinking. And they're really just to enrage and keep me doom scrolling, which is not really beneficial to anybody except the company that's making money from having you do that. Sorry, it was a fly that was coming across me there.
It's all good.
So I got to read all those during that time frame. The Atari 2600, you can only play that for about a half hour. You can't play that for days on end. And there was no way to even watch a movie other than wait for it to come out. And that meant that your parents were going to have to drive you to the theater, and you're going to watch it at 7:15 or 9:30 or whenever it was coming out on Saturday or Sunday. And if you wanted to watch a TV show, it was 8, 9, or 10 p.m. That's it. And so you couldn't have instant access to every movie or TV show that has ever been made in the palm of your hand, on a tablet, on a bigger screen. And there weren't all these apps, and there weren't all these video games. It was just a different time. And it was, I don't think I could have better prepared myself for what I'm doing now if I tried. And I didn't try. I just enjoyed these books. I enjoyed these films. I enjoyed those TV shows. And so all of those, I come at it from the fan perspective. And also around that time, I start reading nonfiction on warfare, counterterrorism, insurgencies, counterinsurgencies. I'm reading everything I can in the nonfiction space because I know that I'm going to join the military, specifically the SEAL teams. And I know from a very early age also that the wars of the future, my war for my generation, is going to have a touch point with terrorism. Because I'm looking at the Newsweek and the Time magazine covers from the 80s, and I'm seeing the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing. I'm seeing TWA 847. I'm seeing Pan Am 103. I'm seeing all these different events that made the covers of those magazines and those newspapers, for the Times, the Journal, local paper, coming across our dining room table. And I'm reading anything that I can that has some sort of a military touch point. So I'm doing all of that. And then after I join the military and make it through BUDS and get into the SEAL teams, now I'm applying that academic study of warfare practically on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan. So when I get back from my last deployment to Iraq, I'm very clear with what I'm going to do next because I wanted to do it since I was 10 or 11, and that's write thrillers. And I prepared myself by reading throughout my entire life without all those distractions, with no job, with no mortgage, with no car payment, with no family I'm responsible for, without all of those distractions, responsibilities, burdens. And that allowed me to read during that formative time that created this foundation that then allowed me in December of 2014 to sit down and write the first sentences of the Terminal List. Because those people who taught me to be storytellers from the fan perspective, added to that academic study of warfare, and now the practical experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, where I can bring the feelings and emotions behind certain events to a completely fictional narrative, but not have it go through any filters. Let's say if I had to find someone who was a sniper in Iraq or Afghanistan, find someone who was in an ambush, and then interview them, and then have those answers to my questions go through all these different filters, preconceived notions I may have, documentaries I've watched, other books I've read, and then twist and turn it around and apply it to a fictional narrative. That didn't exist. It comes right from my heart and soul directly onto the page. And if my protagonist gets ambushed in Los Angeles, California, as part of this totally made up story, well, I remember what it was like to be ambushed in Baghdad in 2006, and I take those emotions and those feelings and apply them to the fictional narrative. So even if someone didn't know any of that, I think they could realize that it rings true. Like they can feel it, that it comes from a real place. And I think that's helped differentiate things.
So speaking of ringing true, like we grew up on the 80s action, the 90s action. We love Commando. We love Rambo, Arnold, Sly, these guys. Speaking of Ludlum, we love the Bourne series. But that action was sensationalized, very Hollywood produced. But we're seeing in the last, I think, 10 years or so in cinema, and now with The Terminalist, I don't know anything about tactical warfare. I don't know anything about how to move, how to enter a room, how to move through an environment. But it's when I watch The Terminalist, I'm like, these guys, these actors, they look like they're highly trained and they're doing things the right way. I don't know what to do, but it's so different from the action we grew up with. And it seems like it's as authentic as possible. Can you talk about the process of making action more realistic, more authentic, and also training actors to do the right things?
Yeah, it was a very deliberate decision from the very beginning, was to not try to be a lower quality version of John Wick.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously highly choreographed. It looks amazing. Obviously, it changed. It moved the needle in Hollywood, created a bunch of people trying to do that same type of a thing. And because the books are so rooted in these foundational elements of authenticity from the modern battlefield, we wanted to do the same thing with the TV show. We didn't want to have everything be as authentic as possible. Then all of a sudden, when it came to a hand-to-hand fight scene, these guys are doing things that is more John Wickish and not something that anyone who's been in a fight has ever seen before. We wanted it to be even those things to be as realistic as possible. So that was a very deliberate decision from the very beginning, was to not do any of the John Wick stuff and to go to something that was more visceral, more primal, something that the audience would then identify with as being visceral, primal, and authentic, which adds to all the other authentic things we're trying to weave in there so that you're not, and this is in the books as well. I don't want let's say a doctor to read a medical portion of my book and lose interest because there's so many mistakes there. I want them to know that even if there are some mistakes, that I at least put the effort into trying to get it right. And because the worst thing you can do is watch a movie or TV show about firefighters with a firefighter, or about police procedural with a police officer, or a SEAL movie with a SEAL, because they'll just be pointing out all the things that are wrong the whole time. So that someone doesn't get drawn out because of those mistakes, we try to get those details right so they go along with us for the ride, for the story. So that's why those details matter so much. And one of those details was making the fight scenes authentic and real and primal and visceral. So we've done that in the first two shows so far, The Terminalist and Dark Wolf, and then the one we just filmed down in Morocco, this fight scene we just filmed down there with Chris Pratt and Luke Hemsworth as Jules Landry. Oh, it's so good. It is so good. I cannot wait to be able to see. They already cut it together. The director who does it cuts it together on the day. He's the only director that does that, and cuts it as he's going and puts together like essentially a director's cut as he's working, which is different from everybody else that I've seen. But it is good. This fight scene is so legit, and that's without music. That's without any time behind multiple monitors with everybody color correcting and doing all that stuff. It's just on the day. Oh, it's awesome, but it's primal, it's visceral, it's hard hitting, and it's realistic. So it's really cool. So that was a deliberate decision to do that at the outset.
Speaking of John Wick, Taron Butler from Taron Tactical, he's a friend of ours, and I know that he designed guns for Terminalist, right? A couple of Glocks,
Yeah.
I think. So did you have any input in terms of the design of the guns, or what kind of handguns you wanted or weapons used in the film? Because obviously there's a ton of really specific weaponry in the Terminalist. Tomahawk in the first season, that sequence in that warehouse is one of the coolest freaking scenes I've seen in years. So what's it like working with Taron designing guns, as well as any of your favorite weapons you're putting into the series and books?
Yeah, it's him and Gary Tours also, who's Extreme Props, and he has a bunch of pictures on Instagram of the gear and all the rest of it. So he does all that. They will kind of work together, kind of hand in hand a lot. But the books are very specific on the gear and on the weapons in particular, and that's because they tell a story. And they help develop the characters. So somebody, and some people might not know, gun might mean the same thing. That doesn't matter if it's a Glock or a Glock 19 or a P226 or whatever. It might not mean, but for some people, it tells a story. And if I see somebody like walk in here and they've got a cocked and lock 1911 on a leather holster on a leather belt, and I can see their age, I can see what sunglasses they're wearing, what shoes they're wearing, maybe the truck they drove up in or something, that tells me a lot about them. Same thing if I see somebody walk in here, it's like a nylon belt and a Kydex holster and a striker fire pistol and okay, sunglasses, shoes, whatever. I can kind of pick like, okay, age. I can kind of guess with a lot of accuracy as to like if they're in the military or not, if they're law enforcement or not, even specifically what branch, even more specifically what type of unit they were in, because all of those things tell a very distinct story. The watch that they're wearing, and it does that in people not without weapons too. A car somebody drives, the clothes they wear tell you a lot about them, and I use all those things very deliberately to develop my characters. But sometimes you can't get something that you would like to have because you are filming in three different countries, and you're in South Africa, you're in Toronto, and you're in Morocco, and things are getting held up by the Moroccan version of the ATF or the Canadian version of that, and there's paperwork and you can't duplicate or whatever else. So you have to keep that in mind as well. And so sometimes you're just going to get things in there that might not be the actual one you wanted, might not be perfect, but that's what you have. And that happens a lot in filmmaking, I found, not just with the gear, but it happens with actor availability. It happens with budgets. It happens with time constraints. There's so many factors that go into making a television show or a film that from the outside looking in, one wouldn't suspect if they weren't, didn't have experience doing that sort of thing in Hollywood. People ask me questions like, why didn't you get so and so to play this part? Well, you don't just get someone. Like they have to want to do it and they have to be available. Like they get a say. You don't like grab someone and drop them in. It's like that's not how it goes. And some people you can't afford. Like there's all these things that that play into making these things. But Taron is amazing. I used one of his pistols in my shootout with Chris Pratt in Terminalist Episode 3. I'm an assassin, I guess, a bad guy, and
All
I'm
on the
getting
street, yeah.
fender bender, and we get in this shootout, and I got to. It was cool that you guys will love this. They wouldn't let me do the crash, so he backs his Land Cruiser, which is my Land Cruiser, essentially, into this car that I'm in, and we have this shootout. But they wouldn't let me do the car crash. I could do the shootout, but they didn't let me do the car crash. And I was like, I could do that. It's just a fender bender. And then I saw how hard they hit, and in real life, it was a lot harder than it even looks on the TV show. And I was kind of like, ooh, glad they didn't let me do that now. Uh, but the guy who doubled me was Mick Rogers, and Mick Rogers doubled Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon when he jumps off the building
Oh,
to that business guy.
no way.
Mick Rogers, yeah. And so he doubled me, and so I got to ask him all about that, and got to ask him about Mel Gibson and Lethal Weapon and all of that. So that was pretty cool to get doubled by Mick Rogers, who's a legendary Hollywood stuntman. And then I got to see how they put bullet holes in windows when they're not like VFX type stuff added afterward. And what they do is they take these like metal straws essentially, and they have a little explosive in the bottom of them and a tiny little ball bearing. And those are all under the dash, so the cameras can't see them. But there's a guy off to the side with a little like iPod type thing or iPad, and he's pressing the buttons that shoot off these little ball bearings, so it looks like bullet holes going in and out through the glass. And that's why I have my sunglasses on, I have my gaiters on there, so that the glass fragments don't get in my eyes. And then they put a squib in the headrest, so when he shoots me in the head over here, the squib in the headrest sprays blood all over the place. And I just throw my head to the side and kind of go like that, and then you gotta hold my breath while he comes and goes through whatever briefcase or paperwork that's next to me on the seat. But it's pretty cool to see how Hollywood does some of that stuff, especially when they're physical effects like
Yeah,
that.
we love special effects.
Yeah.
We're filmmakers too. We're independent filmmakers, and we shot a short film that just came out, and we blew up a car in it. We had a car explosion. And what I learned doing that with our pyro guy is that they shatter the windows.
this like the tenth of a second before the actual fire ignites and the propane canisters explode, so that if you do a normal explosion with a car inside, the windows might not shatter, might not look as cool. But then he showed us how he rigs whatever his rig is to shatter the glass the split second before the bomb goes off, and so it gets that great spray of glass everywhere, and then the explosion at the same time. So it looks like the explosion shattered the glass, but it's actually done predetermined.
No way, I didn't know that. And I've been around some of these explosions, but I never knew that. That's amazing. And what's the short film? How can I find it?
I'll send it to you. It's called One Click. It doesn't release yet. It's still hitting festivals, but we'll send you a private link.
I'd love to check that out.
Yeah, man, that'd be great.
Congratulations. That's really cool.
Thank you,
Thanks,
thank you.
man.
But we did some cool stuff like that in stunts, so we love anything
Yeah.
special effects wise, like especially practical. We love playing around.
There's a situation in Dark Wolf, and it's a situation we see in a lot of military movies, because it allows a subordinate to speak how they want, and it's the permission to speak freely, sir. Now, I want to ask, is this a card that in real life you can only pull every once in a while to a superior? Like, you can't say permission to speak freely like every time you get pissed off about something. Can you only like pull that card out every once in a while?
Yeah, you got to choose your battles, I think, and it probably depends on the officer or the I don't know. It depends on the personalities involved, I would say. But Taylor did such a good job in that scene. It's such a powerful scene. And then the next episode where Commander Cox, played by LaMonica Garrett, is talking about the trident and taking that away. It's such a powerful scene, also. And that one was written by Max Adams, former Army Ranger, and he just really tapped into what that trident means and what it means to take it from somebody. It was really powerful. But Taylor, when he goes off in that scene, was awesome. That was
Yeah, he sells it because you got to get behind the decision he makes that he does, and you get that. And there's a big theme in this show, the line that I love: "May our courage exceed our level of violence." I think this is a really powerful theme. Can you talk about what that means and why it's in this series?
I need to look up who came up with that. And sometimes you don't know even if a writer's name is attached to the episode because it's such a group. Well, I know it wasn't me that came up with that one. It's possible it was the writer, or possible it was Taylor, or possible it was any of the executive producers and writers who jump in. But I feel bad that I don't know that because I've been meaning to ask like who came up with that and get the background because I don't know where that exactly came from. And it's just putting that courage, that penultimate attribute, above all else. And it is a powerful line. It's really, really cool. And love how Taylor delivers that one too. So there's some great lines in this one. And it is really cool to hear one that you remember, like that you put in there. And I never say exactly what they are because I don't want to conflate anything and like mess up. But it is cool when I watch it. I'm like, oh, I remember that. I remember writing that. And that is really cool to see that, whether it's my episode, which is the last one with David DiGilio, the showrunner, or it's the other one, because they really are such collaborative process and collaborative endeavors, which is way different. So the book, no constraints. No budgetary constraints, no actor constraints, none of those, no time constraints like that. But in a TV show, there are constraints across the board and in movies too. And that is, you have that arc you have to tell within each episode. And then you have to have that overarching arc. In the case of Dark Wolf, it's 7. So that's 7 hours, 7 separate hours. And in the Terminalist, it was 8. So each episode has to have that arc. And then there has to be that overarching arc. And you're going to have everyone from the top of Amazon Studios all the way down giving notes on every single episode. And you're going to have things that change on the day of shooting. Locations are going to fall out. The day before, you're going to find out that you don't have the budget for something that you had planned on being in and having it being a big part of a set piece. It's just going to be gone, and you have to adapt to that. And it is crazy. It is very dynamic. The scripts are living documents. The actors bring so much to them, and that's not the case from what I understand in all television shows and films. There are a lot where the actor just comes in, delivers the line. That's what the director wants. That's what the showrunner demands if it's television. And in ours, it's not. It's team television. That's what we call it. We call it Cinevision. So we're filming essentially individual movies on a TV show type of a schedule and timeline, and which makes it insane. People are working so hard on these things, and that's always my takeaway when I'm on set is just one being so grateful that everybody's here doing this, and also how hard every single person is working from the top all the way on down. And what's really cool. Even cooler than that is how many people walk up to me on set and tell me they've been a part of hundreds of these things in Hollywood and they've never felt like this on any other show. And that's all Chris Pratt, David DiGilio, Antoine Fuqua at the top, setting this tone for everyone because you're filming this for, let's say, 8 months. And so that's not even taking into account the writing and it's not taking into account post-production, but just being on set, it's 7, 8 months. And in that time frame, people are going to get divorced, get married, have children. Some kids are going to leave the house and go to college or whatever. They're going to probably maybe lose parents. Like all these, life is going to happen during these 8 months. And Dave DiGilio in particular just makes sure to treat everyone like family. And they really appreciate that and make sure that they tell me on set. And it's really cool. And you can sense it too. Everybody hangs out afterward. The actors tell me the same thing, and they all want to hang out together. So we've really created this family, and everybody wants to get back together and can't wait till we start filming the next one.
It sounds so special and rare in Hollywood, especially because I feel like Hollywood, they have this terrible habit and they can't help it where an IP gets purchased, a book series rights gets optioned, and then they just reinvent it. They change it so much where it's unrecognizable to the original version, to the original artist's vision. And I get it. Like for a lot of people, like I'm trying to make a living here. You know, this is a great decision for me to do. Give this studio or someone wants the rights to my book. But what's it like? Obviously, you have great showrunners and Chris Pratt and Fuqua. They were in the bidding war to get the rights, and then I think Pratt got the rights correct to get it going. But how do you navigate the path of staying true to what your original vision was? With obviously, I think you probably feel lucky to have such great partners with them too, who want to tell the story as right as they can. But Hollywood seems to just change so much to fit a studio's vision or an executive's decision, and just changing so much. But it seems like Terminals you've been able to keep intact.
Yeah, for them. I mean, I knew there was going to be changes, and yeah, Antoine and Chris didn't get in the bidding war because they knew each other, and so they just called each other and said, "Hey, let's do this thing together." And now we're all dear friends, and are working all this together as executive producers, obviously actor, director, and all the rest of it. But it's got so lucky with that. It's just incredible. I'll tell you how that came about in a second, but they usually like to get rid of the author right away, meaning they don't want the author on set saying, "You ruined my vision." So the author usually, I think it was, there's an author who said it, and I'm going to feel horrible that I can't remember who it is now, but he said that he likes to go to the border of California, toss a book over the border, bunch of money comes back over, and then he goes back home. And I kind of get that, but also I wanted to be involved in it. I'm very lucky that I got involved with partners that also want me to be a part of it. And I knew that this was going to change. Like I went into it as a student, and I would go into everything as a student. I've been a student of warfare my whole time in the SEAL teams. I'm a student now. My current profession. I always want my next book to be better than the current one. That's all I want to be constantly improving throughout life in general. In the SEAL teams, I want to be a better operator and leader today than I was yesterday. I want to be a better husband, father, citizen today than I was yesterday. I want to be a better author today than I was yesterday. That's just a part of it. But when it comes to the shows, I knew it was going to be different, and I kept thinking about David Morrell, 1972, First Blood, that being very different than the Sylvester Stallone film in the early 80s. Both great, but so different. And so I kept that in mind when I entered this space in Hollywood. I realized it was going to change, but I'm very fortunate that people want to make this team want to make the best show we possibly can. So there's no egos. Best idea always wins. Of course, there's those constraints that we talked about, but it's all about making the best show for people who are spending time with us that they're never going to get back when they sit down to watch this show. So that's what we owe them is our best effort. So when we started, we wanted to keep the foundational elements of the book, especially that mindset of a modern day warrior, keep that theme of revenge without constraint, but then introduce some other things that we're going to move this story forward visually from the unreliable narrator standpoint, and have that woven in as well, this conspiracy thriller woven in to this political thriller that kind of differentiates it from the book, but that's also a way to tell the story in 8 hours. So there were changes. And now it's cool that they want to keep things more like a book. Like the team uh, wants to do future projects and keep them closer to the books because when they look back, they talk about how every time we do something that is true to the book, it's a win. And so they anyway that's reiterated over and over again. But you can only do so much to keep things the same as a book because you're telling something through obviously through a different medium. And then if I describe something in the book, let's say, and some things it's good to describe, and other things I think it's wise to let that reader describe because they're all bringing a different life experience up to that paragraph, that sentence, that chapter, whatever it might be. So even if I describe a room as green or let's say emerald or the looks like the skin of a frog, whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is. But even with that description, every single person who reads it has a slightly different version of green in their mind. And that translates over across the board in a description of a character because someone has read this paragraph, this description, and their version of that. Even though if you read the same paragraph as someone else, both of you are going to have slightly different takes on exactly the same words because you're bringing a different life experience to it. So you're never going to get it exactly right. You just have to do the best you possibly can to make the best show you possibly can, and that's how you honor your audience, I think.
I love the scale and size of Dark Wolf. It got huge, and the sets are massive. There's gigantic set pieces like that. The prisoner exchange on the bridge was a huge set piece, but also I was really impressed with the base camp, this huge base. Can you talk about, was that all built for the show? And I'm guessing it's set in Morocco. You used Morocco as a double for Iraq. And also, can you talk about what it's like to live on a military base?
Yes. So that was supposed to be Morocco, but and we had it all planned, had the bridge, had everything. And then October 7th happened, and that's right about the time that the author or the writer strike and the actor strike are coming to an end. So we're all set to go over and start filming in January, and there were some security concerns, and so we had to pivot and we moved. That's actually California, where we did that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, well, part of it, not all of it. Only the base part
Hmm.
is California. Iraq is Croatia
Hmm.
and Hungary. So all three of those places doubled essentially for what was supposed to be Morocco. But then we ended up being back in Morocco for True Believer, and it's awesome. Oh my gosh,
Nice.
it's and I love Morocco. And it's only in there because I happened to stumble through back in 1993 when I was traveling around the world because I wanted to have this travel experience like my parents did in the 60s. And I wanted to have that before I joined the military, before I looked at it as I was going to lose all my freedoms and now I'm going to, military has all of me. And so I wanted to have that similar experience that they had traveling around the world, backpacking through Europe, that sort of a thing. So as part of that, I went to Morocco and I remembered the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feel of it. I really loved Morocco when I was there. And it made geographical sense when I wrote the book because I couldn't travel everywhere. I didn't have any money at the time. I couldn't travel to every place that I was talking about in True Believer. So I picked places I'd already been. I'd already been to Morocco. I did go to Mozambique, which I describe in the book. I'd already been to Ukraine also before my time in the military. So I chose places that I'd been. I'd been to Moscow. And so I got to do all of that and weave those in. So it's kind of surreal being back in Morocco for True Believer and it being in the book because I happened to go there before my time in the military and loved it so much that I put it in the book. Now to have Chris Pratt there and this fight scene with Luke Hemsworth and all this stuff happening there is kind of crazy. But for Dark Wolf in particular, yeah, we had to kind of scramble at the last second and use California, Croatia, and Hungary as Iraq.
We're huge fans of Chris Pratt and Antoine Fuqua. Chris, massive megastar, seems so likable. Fuqua has to be one of the most underrated, under-talked about filmmakers in Hollywood because he's made so many great films. But whenever I see people put together lists of like best filmmakers alive, like he's up there. He's made some great movies. I mean, Training Day is amazing. But what's it like working with those guys as well as I want to go back to when you teased talking about how they got involved in terms of the rights to the book for the Terminal List, how it got made, and what's it like working with those guys in the process as well as the other creatives?
It's awesome. I'll talk about Antoine. I mean, he's a genius. He is a creative genius, and people overuse that term, I think. But I don't think I'm overusing it in the case of him and what he's done and what he still has to do. And he's such a good dude, also. Like we're all. That's the great thing about this team is that we're all a bunch. I mean, it seems like regular people get together, talk, we have drinks on Friday. We have to ride motorcycles, talk about cars, trucks. I want to make the best action scene. Hey, how do we do that? How do we make this authentic? How do we blow this thing out of the water? And it's just fun. It's just fun to be around people like that. They're at the top of their games and constantly striving to improve. So, and good people. Good human beings, and yeah, Antoine's just such a genius across the board. Chris Pratt is all people underestimate, I think, how smart he is because they see him in Parks and Rec or whatever else, and they have certain assumptions about actors. Chris Pratt is so smart across the board on all of these things, has incredible instincts when it comes to casting, when it comes to scenes, when it comes to writing. Hopefully, he'll direct and write in the future if he ever wants to. He can, obviously. He gets to choose, but he's so talented at that. His fingerprints are all over the episodes, not just as an actor and executive producer, but as a writer and just brainstorming ideas. And an inspiration to everyone on set, which helps them bring their A games to whatever they're doing, whether it's hair and makeup or stunts or whatever mobility, whatever it might be. I can't say enough great things about these guys. Just incredible to be a part of this team. And the way it came about, being a child of the 80s, I wrote my first sentence to the Terminalist in December of 2014. And so after that first sentence, it's very natural then to start thinking about who you want to star in what's going to be an adaptation of this book that has one sentence written and who's going to. So it's just a very natural thing to do. So it was interesting. I write this first sentence, and I had the title. I had a one-page executive summary. I had a theme to help guide the writing process: revenge without constraint. And that writing it's been the same for all the books thus far. I have a title, I have a theme, I have a one-page executive summary that I read and ask myself, is this worth the next year and a half of my life? And if the answer is yes, then I read it again and say, hey, if someone was walking through the airport and were to pull this off the shelf at Hudson News and read this description or a similar description, would they be willing to invest time in this that they'll never get back? And if the answer to that is yes or probably, then that's what I do next. So it was like that with the first book and remains my process to this day. But when I take that executive summary, turn it into the outline, then I take the outline and turn that into the narrative. And so as I'm turning this outline into the narrative and writing the first sentence, I think, gosh, you know what? Who should star? I don't want someone who's done this stuff before. I want someone who needs to do this for their career. And at the time, I'd just seen Zero Dark 30. So this is Chris Pratt before Jurassic World, before Guardians of the Galaxy, before A-list stardom, and I'd seen that transformation from Andy Dwyer on Parks and Rec to Navy SEAL in Zero Dark 30. And I thought, this Chris Pratt is the guy. This is someone who needs to do this for their career. And I thought about Tom Hanks in the 80s doing all comedies and then taking a risk with Philadelphia in the early 90s and then being able to do whatever he wants. And I thought, who's this generation's Tom Hanks? Who needs to do this for their career? And I thought, that's Chris Pratt, 100%. And then I went back to writing and I thought, well, I picked Chris. Who should direct? I'm like, Antoine Fuqua. I love Training Day. Tears of the Sun, Shooter, adapted from Point of Impact by Stephen Hunter. I thought, oh, Antoine will direct. And I have no connections to Hollywood, no connections to publishing at this point. And I just go back to writing and go through that and get it to Simon and Schuster. And Simon and Schuster loves it. They want to do it, so get an agent and then do it. And then the book's coming out in a few months, and it's November of 2017. And I get a call from a buddy, Jared Shaw, who's now Boozer in the show we talked about earlier. And he calls me out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in 5 years, but we were in the SEAL teams together. And he says, hey, buddy, do you remember me? And I said, of course, Jared. How's it going? And he says, hey, man, I always wanted to thank you for what you did for me in the teams. And I didn't remember what it was. And he said, you're the only person who sat me down in your office, talked about getting out of the military, introduced me to people in the private sector, followed up with me to see if I was doing okay. And no one else did that. I've never forgotten it. And I always wanted to thank you. And I said, man, no problem. Of course. How's it going? He says, it's going great, but I heard you have a book coming out. And I said, yeah, it's coming out in about 6 months or so. It comes out in March, and I can send you a galley. I can send you an early copy if you want, and you can check it out. And he said, I'd like to check it out, but I'd like to give one to a friend of mine. And I said, yeah, what's his name? I'll sign it. I'll sign it to him and send it over. And he said, Chris Pratt. I was like, well, that certainly is convenient for me. And
Serendipity right there.
yeah, and so I sent it to Jared in November of 2017. He read it, loved it, gave it to Chris in December. Chris read it last week in December of 2017 and called the first week in January of 2018, wanting to option it before it hit shelves. And at the same time, in December, a buddy gave one to Antoine Fuqua, another SEAL buddy, did a speaking engagement somewhere, and Antoine was there, and he gave it to Antoine. Antoine read it, loved it, and wanted it also. And so Chris and Antoine found out they both wanted this, and then they called each other and did a handshake and said, "Let's do this together." And so we did.
That's
Fuck
so
yeah, fuck
crazy.
yeah,
That's
that's
so
awesome.
cool.
I
What are
love
the
that.
chances? That's like determinism, fatalism, all
Yeah.
wrapped in one.
That's crazy. And what sets this new series apart is I love how you're depicting the collaboration of the U.S. military with the Iraqi Special Forces going up against ISIS. And I think it's a really interesting way to write a story and a really cool take on military environments and history. Can you talk about that process and also what's it like being inside of ISIS territory?
Yeah, so I was not in Mosul in what did we say, 2017 or 2015 in the show. So
Uh-huh.
it's during that time frame. Other SEALs lost their lives there, but we needed to do something a few years before the events of the Terminal List, so we could see these guys before they change. So you get to see Chris Pratt as James Reese before he loses his family, before his team is killed. In the book, it's in the mountains of Afghanistan, and the TV show, it's in these tunnels in Syria. So you get to see him earlier, which is more Chris than we're going to see later. So he gets a joke, he gets to do that sort of thing. I love the line. I think he ad-libbed it when he walks up to Tom Hopper's character, Rafe Hastings, and says, "Ah, nice shirt. Did they make it in men's?" I think that's all Chris, but that's him. That's James Reese before the events of the Terminal List, before he becomes that person he becomes after his family's killed and his team's killed. So that was really cool. And he did a bunch of ad lib ones like that. I think another one was nice shirt. Where'd you get it, Baby Gap? Like there's a few ones that he did like that. And all the actors do stuff like that, which is really cool. But it had to be early enough
Hmm.
where we get to see them develop and also leave some room for future seasons. So this one, we were very intentional in that we wanted to start Ben Edwards down the path towards that person he becomes in the Terminal List, meaning the person he becomes who can make the decisions that he makes in the Terminal List. And so we have, I think it's a 3 season arc, I would guess. I mean, we'll see, but I would guess it's about a three season arc to get him to that point. Maybe it's more, but in my head it's three. And so that was very intentional to start him down that path. And then where did it make sense then? If we're going back, not from the book back, but from the TV show side back, which is a little bit of a grayer area, book to TV, because there's time has elapsed. So I think in publishing and in Hollywood, the viewer, the reader, they kind of forgive some of that if you have a book a year type of a thing, or you have a TV show every couple of years type of a thing. That morph the time thing kind of morphs a little bit, and that's just going to be how it is. But we had to go back to a time that allowed us to introduce these guys in Iraq and then also make that shift from military thriller into espionage thriller and really have that distinct differentiation between the shows and then between the first episode of Dark Wolf and the next 6 episodes. So that really, we just looked at the world and said, oh, what was going on? Mosul. Okay, there we go. We dropped these guys in there. In the book, I have something happen in Iraq. I'm not sure if I give a year, and I'm very general about what this falling out was I write about it in the early chapters of True Believer, and we just take that and then we expanded it into this first episode of Dark Wolf. And then we move into completely new territory with characters that now we don't have to introduce in True Believer. We don't have to introduce flashbacks or conversation between characters that sets up how they know each other. Now we've already done that in Dark Wolf. And so we can move right into True Believer and not spend any of that time on backstory, but just propel this whole thing forward. So it worked on a few different levels.
And you're also going back in time in your new book, Cry Havoc. Hits shelves today, October 7th. Get it everywhere. Thanks for sending us
There
a
it
couple
is.
of copies.
Yeah.
Jack, we had such a blast chatting with you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. We love the Terminal List. We can't wait to see what you got going on in the future after Dark Wolf. Want to see more sequels, prequels, or whatever, spin-off. Love to see you do some film as well on the big screen in theaters. Is there anything you'd like to say to the listeners, to the followers out there?
Man, I just appreciate you guys having me on. I love talking books, films, television shows. As you can tell, I can talk about that stuff all day long. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. Sounds like you're having a blast. Can't wait to watch you guys' independent film. Really looking forward to checking that out. And man, just thanks for having me on, and thanks for all you guys do.
Thanks for
Awesome.
the time,
Thanks,
man.
Jack.
Absolutely. You guys take care.
This episode was executive produced by our chosen one patrons, Nicholas Martin and Jacob Kostler. Raiders of the Lost podcast is a Mirror Image production.